We continue now with the medium in our sixth Bible, the third in this section, and here I am using the English Standard Version, the ESV. Now, this has no article, but it has a quite a long series of notes dealing with this. But I am going to read you the most relevant note because some of these other notes take you through the history of this type of necromancy, witchcraft, or divination practice. And it tells you where it came from, how popular it was, and even though it was condemned, it was still done in certain places for certain reasons. What we get to, though, is the crux of the matter here. We can come to the place where what actually happened, and this is what we're after, what actually happened. So I am going to read you now this note here, and it says, when Samuel said to Saul, now here's the note on that. The character of this event has long been debated, whether the spirit was really Samuel or how the medium could command the spirit of a holy prophet. As far as the narrator is concerned, this really is the spirit of the dead prophet Samuel. He is called Samuel. He speaks much as he had spoken to Saul during his lifetime. And Samuel describes David as Saul's neighbor. He uses the name the Lord 7 times and as the prophecy that Saul and his sons would die. It is hard to think that the thought that Saul and his sons would, it was hard to find out or to realize that the thought was a deception, an illusion performed by a woman of some demonic spirit against Saul. An evil spirit could not deliver a proof prophecy of the word to Saul as Samuel does. That the woman's actions brought Saul up is implied in verse 15. Why have you disturbed me? A somewhat whatever limits the medium's power normally were, in this case, the Lord let her rouse the spirit of Samuel himself. Now, here you see this is somewhat different because in the others it said it was the woman herself who had this particular power. Others said it was God who did it, not this woman. Now, this one has both together. It says this was actually a real event because everything that was said was quite right, as Dake said, and that everything that was spoken was exactly what happened. It wasn't faked in any sense. And that this woman who had this ability in this case, maybe in other cases, but only in this case, as we know in the Bible, did have this ability or power, whatever you want to call it, to allow the other person dead and in Sheol to come up to communicate with the living. And in this case, it appears that God didn't do it himself, as some others have said, but allowed this woman to do that. So God is in the role, but he is only an allower, he's not the doer. There's the difference. So in this ESV Bible, I think we get a good summary of some of the others and get a better glimpse at what this means. Whether or not one has accepted any of these points of view is not the point. The point is to be aware of a passage which has so difficulty in understanding it. It does have many, many points of view, and our own point of view can be perhaps a little more enlightened by having these commentaries. Some will say the commentaries give you the commentary's point of view and not your own. One can have one's own point of view by reading it, of course. But in my mind, I think commentaries give you a broader spectrum from which to choose rather than your own personal spectrum. So that is why I have chosen these 6 Bibles with their comments and or articles to give us a better understanding of, as I've said, perhaps one of the most difficult passages in the entire Bible to understand. It is possible for one of these people who have this power, who was forbidden in all of Israel, except in some places, to do this, forbidden completely, and yet was used in this particular case and allowed by God to do this. The question is, of course, why would God allow it? And why was she used? And so on. So we've seen many answers. We still have many questions. But I think this gives us a good point of view for this particular difficult passage. And I leave it up to you to have your own point of view. And I'd love to hear from you. If you know my email, you can write me back. And it's wonderful to have spoken with you, and have a great day.